Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Backstage Bikini podcast with your hosts, Grace and Jade. And on today's episode, we have IFBB Bikini Pro. We have talked about her so much on the podcast. She's been in our reviews, and we just love her as an athlete. So we couldn't wait to dive into her journey, especially considering her season last year. Ariana Brothers, welcome to the podcast. Did I say your name right?
Yes, you
Yes.
did. Thank you so much for
Amazing.
having me. I'm excited.
Good. How are you keeping anyway? Are you in an off season at the moment? Where are you at?
No, actually, as of yesterday, we are about a week and a half out from doing the Tampa Pro.
Okay.
Yes, excited about
Nice.
that.
Ooh, unreal.
I was
So,
going to say, you've had a bit of a break, haven't you, Ariana? You've had a bit of a break. You competed earlier on in the year, reversed out. We'll get into like feedback and things like that. But how are you feeling sort of between shows? What's it been like in terms of pulling out to go back in again?
Honestly, I feel much better this time around than I did earlier in the year. So, getting
Yeah.
ready for Pittsburgh, I had surgery last year. So I didn't work out for about 7 weeks. And then the
Wow.
start of this year, I ended up prepping again. So it was like the end of January we started, and I just don't think I gave myself enough time to be ready
Okay.
for
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. So obviously, when I look back now, I'm like, I wish I would have had more time. I wish I would have given my body more time to maybe heal, drop some
Mm.
inflammation, maybe build up my food just a little bit more leading into that show. But I mean, I learned from it, and I'm
Yeah.
glad that it happened because now I know moving forward what not to do and not to just rush into things. So I feel
Mhm.
much better this time around going into it. And I think we're in a good spot. So.
amazing.
Yeah.
Love to hear
No,
that.
it's exciting.
Very exciting.
Mm. It's
So,
exciting.
I suppose we'll just get straight into it. Like, we want to
Yeah.
hear more about your background and how you got into competing. Like Jade said, I know you took a bit of an off season as well for a few years, but like bring us back to, I suppose, the early days and kind of what drove you to step on stage and carry us through that journey.
Yeah, so it started in 2019. So my husband and I actually met in 2017, and we both had talked about, the idea of competing one day because we both worked out. We were kind of just like into it. It was kind of like our hobby. So we were like, let's just, start off and just see what we can do because this just seems like a fun idea. So the beginning of 2019 is when we both started prepping for our first NPC show. And he ended up competing first. I competed later in the year. And at my first show that I had, I ended up winning the overall. Obviously, that's always the goal, right? But then you don't realize what's to come after. So at that point, because I won my regional show, I'm like, okay, well, let's try a national show, just to kind of see how it is, get the experience. And so we did 4 more weeks of prep and we did nationals, and I ended up getting my pro card there and then took the overall, which I was not expecting. So it was like a big whole new world for me, not what I was expecting at all from like my first time ever just trying to compete. And then here
Mhm.
we are at nationals and we did this. So after that, I was like, okay, so this is like the real deal. So now I can compete with pros, but I feel like I don't really look like the pros just yet. So that was the start. It was 2020 right after that. It was the start of all the COVID stuff. So I was prepping for my pro debut, but then the show got shut down. So it's kind of like in limbo that whole year. I ended up doing my pro debut in, I think it was like April, but I did not look my best. It was again one of those years where it was like, you don't know what to expect. Do I keep going? I don't know. And I had been prepping for a while already at that point. So after that, I kind of just shut things down because I was like, like
Mm.
I just didn't feel that good. I just knew I needed a break. And
Yeah.
I just felt like I just wasn't ready to kind of compete anytime soon. And I was okay with the idea of never competing again for whatever reason at that time.
Mm.
So I was like, you know what, if it ever comes back to me and that feeling and the excitement, then I'll know that I'm ready to do it. So I took 3 years
Mm.
off, and then it was the beginning of 2023. My husband and I were talking, and I think we were just on the subject of like, like what if you went to the Olympia one day? Because I know that you can do it. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, ideally, like that's the goal, if I end up doing it again, but I don't know. So it didn't hit me until like later that week. And I was like, I think I want to compete again. And ever since then, that's when we just started back and we haven't stopped since. So here we
It
are.
absolutely snowballed that year as well. Like the irony as well. It's almost, I'm chuckling to myself because I just think it's such a novelty for you. And it's quite refreshing, Ariana, that it's such a novel thing for you to be like, oh, I'll try competing. Oh, okay, I'm good at it. Okay, I'll go back into the pro league. I'll give it a proper shot.
Mhm.
And it'd be great to hit the Olympia stage. And you did it at the
Yeah.
end of that year. You won 2 pro shows that year, didn't you?
Yes.
You
Yep.
too? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. Like in terms of sort of catching up with yourself, how have you found that? Is it been a whirlwind? Has it felt like a whirlwind, or have you landed with anything that's happened up until this point?
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes I still think about it and I'm like, that really happened. It's kind of hard to think about. Sometimes I don't give myself a chance to actually think about what has happened or what I've
Mm.
experienced so far, and like sometimes you rush so much and try and get through the process that you don't take a step back just to be like, wow, like I'm actually here, I'm actually doing this. So I
Yeah.
actually thought about it the other week and I was like, wow, the fact that I was at the Olympia last year, I'm like, now it's starting to hit me like that actually means something. In the
Yeah.
moment I was so excited, right? And I just didn't, I guess, feel how appreciative I was to really be there, because it was just so
Mm.
much excitement to begin with. And I'm just like, wow, like this is cool. I'm so new to everything, this whole backstage thing. Wow. And then I'm just like, I hope I can do this again this year. Like it just really
Yeah.
hits you and it's like I'm excited for it, but I know this time around I want to make sure I'm present in every moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I
Mm.
think you need to kind of do
Yeah.
it to take a step back and learn to be more present. We actually spoke about it on the most recent podcast as well. But what
Yeah.
I'm so
Mm.
interested in, and we speak about it a lot on here, is kind of like quick success. And by no means we're not saying like you're lucky, you have a great physique and was obviously deserving of a pro card, but we do compare, I suppose, journeys that it might take a lot longer, and how that kind of feeds into their pro league experience as well. Do you feel like the kind of when you were working your way up as an amateur, that did feed into maybe the time off or the feelings of not wanting to keep compete again because you had got that so soon? If you were to take us back to then, like I suppose comparing it to if you were kind of maybe 3-4 years as an amateur kind of working your way up.
Yeah, so I actually think that's a really good question and a good way to kind of think about that because when I think about that now, I can say, yeah, like I think because it happened so
Mm.
quickly and I was like, okay, I did what I wanted to and I accomplished that. I'm like, okay, maybe I need a break. So I
Yeah.
feel like if that didn't happen, I feel like I would still probably be going, because
Mm.
it's like you want to make sure that you're hitting those goals that you've set for yourself or you're making your physique look exactly how you want it to, or you are chasing your pro card and that's just a goal of yours. Like I'm sure all of us as competitors, it's like we have those goals that we want to reach and
Mhm.
we'll do whatever we can just to get there. Even if that means it's going to take 2 years, 3 years, it doesn't really matter. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can say if it didn't happen so quickly, I'd probably still be going for it. So
And
Yeah.
was your goal
Yeah.
when you originally kind of got into it, like, was it just to get your pro card, or were you thinking of the Olympia at that point?
no. So at that point, I actually just wanted to compete just to say that I've competed before because I was like, I really like working out, but I want to take this to the next level. Like I had never
Yeah.
done like more extreme dieting and then just like the consistent training. I'm like, so let's try it. So that was really the
Mhm.
goal. And then once I won my first regional show, I was like, okay, so then let's just see if we can do like a pro card. That'd be awesome. But like, I know it's really hard. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing that. So I'm like, you know what? Like, I think sometimes when you go in with no expectation, I think that puts less
Mhm.
pressure on yourself. And then you're able
Yeah.
to just kind of be more in the moment and be like, wow, I did that. I'm so proud of myself and I'm happy that I was able to get here. And I'm glad that I had that mindset, because you never know what to expect with competing. So I think just constantly being open and just doing it for you and what you set for yourself is really all that
Mhm.
that kind of matters in the end.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, it's flipping it to that mindset. We love the mindset element of this sport. Like, I think it's such a pivotal thing to have your mind in the right place in order to progress forward, no matter what your goal, whether it just be step on stage the once and then come away and never do it again, or go the lengths that you've gone to, Ariana. Like, have you found your mindset, because it was very resilient and very present at that point, and a very early start. Have you found it sort of strengthen over time? Have you found the pressure seep in over time? Like, what's it been like sort of transitioning that quickly into the pro league and sort of catching your mind up?
Yeah, so I would say, just honestly, I feel like it's strengthened over time, but I
Mhm.
think you have to allow yourself to give yourself the time for it to strengthen, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I knew going into the pro leagues, I was like, well, these girls are very different from amateur. They just they're more conditioned, they're more polished. So I was like, at that point, I knew I wasn't there. And I know
Mhm.
even taking time off, I'm like, I'm still going to work out in hopes that obviously I will come back in the pro leagues and look like I am a pro. So I think going into last year, my kind of, I guess you would say, rookie season, I
Mhm.
think, again, not having any expectation, because I knew I had taken 3 years off. I didn't know if I still looked, like the bikini standard. So I was like, whatever happens at my first show, I'm okay with, because I just want to get feedback just to be better. And I
Yeah.
was okay with, I guess, getting your feelings hurt or whatever it is. It's like, no, the way I look at it is constructive criticism. And that's why we do this. And we need to be
Mhm.
receptive of it, because if not, then we're never going to be better. So I went into my first show. I did Republic of Texas, and I think I got 13th there. So obviously
Yeah.
not ideal, but I wasn't mad, because I'm like, I had taken 3 years off.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I can, at this point, I'm only just going to get better. So I'm like, okay, we're not super far off. So let's just keep working and just see what they say. And
Mhm.
then come my second show, I ended up placing second. So I was like, okay, so we're doing something here. So I think that has helped strengthen my mind. And again, we're going to lose more times than we're going to win. So keeping that
Mhm.
in mind and just telling yourself it's okay if that happens, I think that will allow yourself to keep moving forward with this sport, because you never know what to expect. Every show is going to be different. Your physique might look different another
Yeah.
show. And I think just, again, being open to the fact that we're all going to get better, and not getting so down on yourself sometimes. And it's hard not to, especially when you are on low calories and you're expending so many calories and stuff throughout the day. It's hard not to just have your mind go with it too. But
Mm.
I think it's important just to, even before bed, waking up in the morning, just tell yourself it's okay. Like, as long as you're trying your best, that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And considering your like sort of entrance into the sport arena, it's a very wholesome way of looking at it. Like, in terms of your approach to loss and wins are very neutral. And that's something that, as we've already sort of acknowledged in this conversation, it takes such a long time to build that resilience in your mind. Did you have any other exposure to sort of any background that gave you that resilience, or is that just something that you've always sort of positioned yourself with and it's transferred into competing?
Yeah, so I think it kind of just stems from probably my childhood. Like, my mom was a
Mhm.
single mom, and I saw her kind of be resilient my whole entire life. And it
Yeah.
was my brother, my sister, and I. And to have 3 kids on your own, and to do it and have a house and try and pay for that and groceries and all that stuff. And it's like, I could tell, she just never gave up. It didn't really matter what was going
Mm.
on. She always found a way. And even if she had to work 2 or 3 jobs, she still made it happen. And I think back and I'm like, I didn't always know of the struggles. She just always did it, and she
Mm.
was there and did what she could. So I think me seeing that and my mom, I'm like, gave me that resilience to be like, you know what, I can do whatever I want. And thankfully she instilled that in me and always believed in me. I think it's important, especially when you're a child, to
Mhm.
to have your parents tell you, like, you can do whatever you want. Like, I believe in you, I have faith in you, and constantly supporting you. I think that has played a big part.
Mm.
Growing up, we couldn't afford playing, sports and stuff. We didn't have the money for it. So I was able to kind of cheerlead for a couple of years, but I had to ask my dad for money and hope that he would help.
Mm.
And he
Yeah.
did, but it wasn't every year. And so I was able to at least do something. So I always wanted to do sports, but it was just never there for me. But now I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I can make this happen. And I think having, waited for things like this later in life, it makes you appreciate them more. And yeah, I just don't take it for granted now. So I think that's kind of just allowed me to just be resilient and just always tell myself that we're just going to get through it and everything's going to be okay. Because in the end, everything is always okay. There's always going to be a way. And whether it's the way you think or not, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that mindset is just
That's
like
insane.
so crucial for bodybuilding as well. Because like you
Mhm.
said, you
Yeah.
are on low calories. Like there's not many other sports that like really do test you. So you need to kind of have that kind of thick skin and like you said, self-belief, and it's huge
Mhm.
as well growing up from parents. But I suppose going back to last year, when you did play second, you had mentioned that obviously we're going into last season or last year, even kind of just seeing where you stood after 3 years, I think getting in front of the judges after that time frame, and for them to recognize you and know the name, like I think that is a huge thing. But when you play second, was there, a little voice in your head being like, okay, right, we can actually make this Olympia happen? Did you have that in your mind last year? And then when you placed second, it was like, right, I'm going to the next show. I'm gonna go for this.
Yeah. So I knew in the back of my head before I even placed second, I was like, okay, it can happen. I've seen it happen to girls that have just worked their whole, rookie season or whatever it is. I've seen it happen. So I know we can make it happen. And so when I placed second, I'm like, to me, that just validated what I was thinking, like I think it's great to think highly of yourself, but at the same time, we also have to be realistic. So I'm like, I know that my conditioning could have been better. And I know that if I do become more conditioned, then that might allow me to get to the Olympia. So at that point in time, when I placed second to Ashton, I was like, I already feel very honored to even be on the stage with other Olympians, and to know that I had placed second against Ashton, I'm like, that's a big statement. So
Yeah.
like at that point, I just want to be better. How can I be better? And immediately after the show, we talked to Bill and he was like, just work on your conditioning. And that's what we did the whole entire season. The rest of the season is we worked on conditioning. I'm like, if we need to get better, we will, that's all I have to hear. So yeah.
Really
That's, yeah. I
good.
remember watching.
Yeah.
Do you remember watching the win, Grace? I was just blown away. I was like, what on earth has just happened? Like, who? Because that was our sort of first exposure to you. Because
Yeah.
I always find the sort of within your amateur sort of building your career, like it's very much like the roots of a plant, isn't it? Or roots of a flower. You don't see the roots, and that's part and parcel of why Grace and I enjoy speaking to you all so much, because we get that background, you get that picture. But I remember watching you win and being like, and then going on to the Olympia. What was that like, Ariana, when you got, because you won two pro shows, so not only the first, but then the second. What on earth was it like? What was going through your head as you were sort of walking out onto that Olympia stage?
So when we qualified for the Olympia, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is happening. This is literally what we're speaking about at the beginning of the year. I'm like, it's happening finally. So I'm like, the fact that I was even able to make it to the Olympia, that to me was just the goal, and not that my goal stopped after that, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, like we're in the right direction. We're doing this.
Yeah.
So just being there and experiencing everything when it comes to the Olympia as an athlete, it was like a complete honor. Like, I mean, it's a whole week filled with festivities, and I'm still new to this. So I'm like, I don't know where the meet and greet is, or just having to be here for check-ins or whatever it is, and just trying to figure things out. So it was awesome because I felt like, okay, this is my first Olympia too, like as a spectator, just to kind of see everything and be a part of it. But then to actually be on the stage and to be with all the other beautiful Olympians that are there, I'm like, in a way, it makes you feel like, are they correct? Am I supposed to be here? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if are they not tricking me, like, so after prejudging and everything, I didn't realize, but it's only the top 10 that make it to the finals. And I had no
Yeah.
idea. And the fact that I was able to be on the final stage, I'm like, that was a complete honor to even just step foot on there. And I didn't realize, you don't realize it until it's happening. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm about to step out on the stage. It's like dark, there's lights everywhere. I mean, it was absolutely incredible to just even be there and just experience it as an athlete.
Mm-hmm. So super
let alone come seventh. It was seventh,
Yeah.
wasn't it, at the Olympia in your rookie season, rookie pro season,
Mm-hmm.
first Olympia outing, and you were seventh. And that was one of the largest Olympias for the
I think
bikini athletes,
so.
wasn't it? Was it 54 athletes that competed in the
Yeah,
end?
I think it was like 50 something. It was like 51,
Yeah,
52, something like that. I
yeah,
think a couple people had to drop out, but yeah, it was
yeah.
like right around 50 or so.
Incredible.
It was such a huge show.
Yeah.
And like Jade said, like so rare in your rookie season. Do you think
Mm.
like a lot of that is to do with the time that you took off to build, and it kind of allowed you to stand against these people who've been, competing year on year and in the game like a while, do you know? Do you kind of owe it to that time off?
I actually, yes, like I do think that. And I think it's also important to allow yourself to kind of give yourself that time sometimes if you need it. So my feedback back when I did my pro debut 3 years prior to, I think it was conditioning, and I just needed to just kind of work on just a little bit of everything. Um, my I never had anybody tell me that I had to work on my glutes or work on just, my balance or anything like that. My shape was good, but it could be better. So in my head, I still watched the shows. I still was kind of keeping up with who was winning, who was going to the Olympia. And to me, I still trained as if like, okay, if I do step on stage, I want to make sure that my glutes are a little bit more developed. They have that density. My shoulders will balance out with my glutes. So in my head, I'm glad that I took 3 years off. I may not have needed 3 years, but mentally I was happy that I took 3 years off. But again, if you do need to grow certain things on your physique, I do think it's important to take an off season, take a year or two, even just physically to give your body a break, but mentally, sometimes we just have to kind of reset and have that urge to want to do it again, because then it kind of just takes the fun out of it completely. And you feel like you're being forced to do it. And it's like, you shouldn't have to feel like that, like you should want to do this and want to be better. And I'm glad again that I did take those 3 years. And I think a lot of girls, even guys too, like should not feel bad if they decide to take a year or two off, and let's not forget too that you won't be forgotten about, if you come back and you really make a statement and you're fitting the criteria, you won't be forgotten about.
Yeah,
So,
you'll be remembered more. Do you know the kind
yeah,
of way? Like you, like as soon as you popped up, we were like, who is this dark
right.
horse? But I think that is so true. And people do want to stay relevant, or they compete year on year because they feel like they have to. But like you said, you appreciate it so much more. What's the saying? Like absence make the heart grow fonder. I
Mhm.
think you can prep better as well, which is incredible. Um, I suppose go off the back of those like two wins, did you feel any pressure then with going into the Olympia, like I said, up against like these big names as well?
In a way, no, but I just wanted to make sure I still brought my best.
Yeah.
So I still knew that I'm still technically like a new pro, so I don't have any, I didn't have any expectation other than just to make sure I looked better than my last show. So as long as I did that, I was okay with that. I think unintentionally we all put pressure on ourselves, especially leading into such a big show. So I think it was underlying, but it wasn't big enough to overwhelm me.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, I was just like, okay, as long as we can bring in our conditioning a little bit better, because that was my feedback, then I'm happy with that, and my next goal after that is just to make sure I qualify for the Olympia again.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing that 2 weeks after the Olympia, which I'm glad that we did and we got it out of the way. But that was like going to be my next pressure for myself. But I think though there might be more pressure on yourself or myself this year just because I've already experienced one Olympia. So I'm like, of course, ideally, you always want to be better than you were before.
Yeah.
So I think that will probably be there. But as far as last year, I don't think that it had truly had that much pressure, I guess, on myself then.
No.
Yeah.
I suppose, like you said, the expectations were managed at that point, weren't they? Very much so, in terms of like, it's almost like stepping on stage for the first ever time. You don't know what you're going to look like until you actually get on there. So until you know what you're experiencing, where you're going to stand, where you're going to sit. And I suppose that would unequivocally impact you now going into the next Olympia. Do you do anything in particular, Ariana? So like, is there anything that you sort of, in terms of self-care, like mindset management, anything, is that something that you prioritize now more than ever around your success now? Is that something that's important to you?
Yes, and I
Mm.
think it should be important to a lot of people that see themselves competing long term. One
Yeah.
thing I always do before any show is I'll always, obviously we hope for the best for every show, and one thing that has helped me is I, of course, set for myself like, okay, our hopes are to at least, let's try and make first call outs or whatever it is. But I always prepare myself and I think about the fact of what if I don't make first call outs?
Mhm.
What if I make second call outs, right? And so I experience that in my head and I think about how I would feel in that
Mm.
moment. So that way I kind of prepare myself for both scenarios. And that way it doesn't all hit you at one time. And sometimes it's hard, like when it's show day and you're just, you look amazing, right? This is the best that you feel like you've looked and it doesn't go how you expect. That can be crushing for some people. And it's hard, So I think allowing yourself to think about both scenarios
Yeah.
will just allow you to handle that so much better and will allow you to move forward and be able to grow from that. So
Mm.
that is something that I do for every show. And it's helped me, it's helped me
Mhm.
stay positive and still look at like, okay, well, maybe it wasn't supposed to be this way. We still have more shows, we still have more time. So let's just go from there. And then I just
Mhm.
compartmentalize and we can think about it later. But that has helped me tremendously.
Yeah.
And from a longevity standpoint, sorry, Grace, we talk about longevity all the time. From a longevity standpoint, that's going to armor your mindset so much more because you've already said it, Ariana. We're going to come up against wins. We're going to come up against losses. The losses will probably outweigh the wins pretty vastly. So it's the first time I've heard anybody actually mentally prepare themselves, because I think from my standpoint, I always take the view of, right, picture yourself in the worst case scenario. Anything up from that is a bonus, but I can find that quite limiting sometimes personally. So to put
Mm.
yourselves in both seats
Mm.
is something I'm going to be taking away, I think.
It's so
It
interesting because
helps.
I would always have been told only think about winning. And
Yeah.
don't think of the loss because that will happen.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
so interesting how everybody has different mindsets. And I think like obviously your coach has a big role to play in that, and maybe
Yeah.
also how you've been brought up. But,
Mhm.
my environment when I was prepping was, don't think of the worst outcome. And I think then when I did get anything less than what I was told, could get like a first or a program, whatever it was. I was incredibly disappointed when that didn't happen. But like Jade said, like it does prepare you, and also in your case, it made you appreciate why you did place the way you did. Because
Mhm.
it was meant to happen, rather than thinking like this is the worst thing in the world, it failed, I've disappointed everybody around me, but rather like no, this was meant to happen and I can be better from here. So it's really interesting to hear the different mindsets. But I suppose like, has there been any, I suppose, pitfalls in your journey the last few years where um even like during when you took the off season that you just maybe really really struggled with your headspace or self-doubt or anything like that, or has it always been the way it is now?
So I will say that really kind of happened mainly after Pittsburgh of this year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So obviously, I knew going into it, I had a different stage weight than last year, but I had gotten breast augmentation surgery. And, obviously, sometimes your body recomps a little bit. So in my head, I'm like, okay, maybe it's because of those reasons, but
Mm.
I still didn't feel extremely confident going into the show. So I think afterwards, knowing that I could have been better, I think I struggled with that after, because I was like, why did I maybe rush to get back on
Mhm.
stage if maybe I didn't feel confident. Like, was that a mistake? You know, should I have really done that? Should I have waited? And I think I struggled with that a little bit more than I have with anything prior to. And you know, I'm glad it's a part of my journey, but at that moment in time, it took me about a few weeks because I was like, I know at this point, I just need to give my body more time. So let's just build up some food and, you know, I'm still going to keep training. Maybe I need to increase my intensity a little bit more. But that was hard for me because I just felt like in a way I was like, did I let myself down? Did
Yeah.
I like do something that I may regret? Should I have just waited? You know, so you think about all these things that, you know, like the what ifs.
Yeah.
But again, from that, I learned, okay, never rush anything. You know, if you're not ready, there are still going to be shows, there's still going to be time to step on stage. So it's important for you to just come in your best. And if you're never ready, just keep holding off, you know, like
Mm.
that's what I really learned from it. So I think from that show, I learned to just make sure I'm taking my time and to take each day as it is. And, you know, just know that I took 3 years off. So there's really no rush for anything, you know? So that was really when I really kind of struggled just a little bit more than I had anticipated.
Right.
Mm.
Okay.
I think you can get to a point, can't you, where you almost have this high level of expectation for yourself that you're just accustomed to pushing yourself. You know your body can do it. You know your mind can achieve the things that you want it to as well. So it comes a point where you sort of have to stop and acknowledge whether your body's actually catching up with your mentality and where you're physically putting yourself in your mind. I've experienced it recently, so it's resonating a lot with me talking to you, Ariana, because I found it incredibly difficult to sit and look at objectively at myself at that time and be like, okay, maybe now isn't the right time. Maybe you're trying to force this. And a lot of sort of negativity and a lot of sort of self-doubt, a lot of self-criticism. Is that where you found yourself? Were you quite critical of your decisions at that time?
Yes. And the whole
Mm.
time, kind of before my prep, because I was like, you know, my weight wasn't going down. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm this much over my last stage weight. It just doesn't make sense to me, you know. But I would look at my pictures and I'm like, okay, you know, we do look a little bit leaner. I'm like, but at the same time, it just still didn't feel right. You know, I'm like,
Mhm.
there was
Yeah.
no way I should be this weight stepping on stage. So in my head, I already had this self-doubt because I think I knew internally that I just wasn't where I should be. And
Mm.
I think that also played a part in it too. And it's like, why didn't I just listen? You know, like, why didn't I just like allow myself to just be like, yeah, you know what, you are right. So yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that plays a big part. And I think beforehand, if you feel confident going into a show and you go and you don't have any expectation for yourself, I think that's when you do the best. Even if it's not the best placing, it's the best
Mhm.
mentally of how you handle whatever it is. You know, so
Yep.
at that time for Pittsburgh, I didn't feel any of that beforehand, you know.
Mhm.
But I know moving forward for the rest of this year, it's important for me to have that. And if I don't, then I shouldn't probably be doing that show.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah, it's a big thing to learn. It is a big thing to learn, and I think just having that awareness now, Ariana, no matter what, like having that awareness for yourself now, that intuition that you had, but you still stepped on stage anyway, you're going to be able to trust that going forward, regardless now, and that can only strengthen somebody's journey.
Yeah.
Going back, I want to jump back quickly to your off season because that was a prolonged period of time, sort of stepping away from stage. How did you manage mentally in that period? So, like not being on stage, not prepping, having to consistently show up for yourself day in, day out without necessarily seeing the feedback or receiving the feedback in terms of where your physique was at. How was that mentally on you? Was that any more or less challenging than what a prep would be, for example?
Honestly, I was kind of enjoying it, you know, like I
Yeah.
was enjoying not having a ton of structure just because I did for a while beforehand.
Mm,
And I wasn't really used to not having structure because that's kind of just been my life, you know, and I went to school for nutrition. So like that's just kind of been like my life for a while, you know. So I'm like, it's nice to kind of take a step back and just not have so much discipline for a while. But I think it helped me mentally reset.
mhm,
And I think not putting that pressure on myself of, okay, I need to do this, 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 this today I need to make sure I train today and I train tomorrow and whatever else. I think I'm glad that I didn't do that to myself,
Yeah.
because, and again, I wasn't expecting for it to be 3 years, but I think mentally it was good for that to be that long, at least for myself, to be able to mentally come back and be like, okay, I'm mentally ready to be able to be extremely disciplined again and have my routine set and not feel like I'm missing out on anything.
Yeah.
So I think honestly, in a way, like I was happy about it. And again, like I still kept up with, girls that were winning shows and who was showing up at the Olympia. I would still watch the shows and I was happy for them. And I just was excited to kind of see, okay, this is how their physique is looking. This is how their glutes are looking. So I tried to just kind of stay with it in a way, like
Yeah.
making my training kind of similar to still what I was doing beforehand, just maybe a little bit more intense. And honestly, I didn't put on a ton of weight, but I'm glad that I did put on a little bit of weight because I think it kind of helped me grow a little bit as far as like my muscle density and stuff like that too. So
Yeah.
I think that helped, sometimes staying in a deficit for so long and restrictive calories for years and years and years, it will actually do the opposite for your body. So I'm glad that I did take that time.
Yeah. And
Because I
did
think
you?
it's something that people don't do enough. And it sounds
No.
like those 3 years, it just came very naturally to you.
Mm.
You know, you trained because you actually loved it, not because you felt like you had to. And the way of eating, and it took the pressure off yourself. And we've said on the podcast before, like sometimes you can make those off seasons very, very similar to a prep. And that does more harm to your body, that the stress that you hold, and then you go into a prep and you just don't feel like you've had any kind of time off. But it's good that you still kind of kept yourself in the industry as well. Like you just clearly loved it. I suppose comparing that time off to your recent time off, and I suppose going forward with your off seasons, do you think you'll ever take that long a time off again or have a similar approach? And how, I suppose, how does the 3 years compared to like what you've done recently was a bit different in terms of like pushing food, or do you feel like you're at a place now that maybe you don't need to kind of grow as much and the time off is really just like resting your body? Does that
Yeah,
make
so
sense?
I think now if I were to take any time off, which there might be like maybe a period of like a few months or maybe 6 months or something like that moving forward, after this year's Olympia, but I think for me, I don't need to grow anymore. That's not been my feedback once, mainly just been conditioning. I probably won't ever take that much time off again, just because I feel like, I've worked this hard to get to the goal that I wanted, which is
Mhm.
being at the Olympia. And that's going to be my goal every year now. So
Mhm.
just to make sure we can qualify and just be there every single year, that I think I would probably have extreme FOMO if I did not make it to the
You're
Olympia
so
and took
close now.
3 years off. Yeah, took 3 years off again. So yeah, that's gonna be the goal. And I think after the Olympias and moving forward, as far as like what shows we plan to do and stuff, I think the most I would do is probably just a few months,
Mhm.
6 months, whatever it is. And then honestly, just kind of focusing on making sure I consistently build up my calories as much as I can. Obviously, every prep is different, and sometimes you have to work a little bit harder as far as
Yeah.
restricting your calories or expending more. So I'm learning that and I'm okay with it, but it's still always a goal of mine to be able to work that up and be better about that in, I guess, an improvement season too.
Mhm.
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 Sure.
Have you found it challenging, Ariana? Like, obviously, because your sort of amateur season was so short in terms of like your jump into the pro league, have you found those lessons that I feel like I've learned in sort of competing as an amateur? So the preps being different, that kind of thing, and your body responding in different fashions, and things happening quicker, things happening slower. How have you found that? Managing that in terms of a pro setting as well, because obviously a lot of this information is still coming to you now because you're still competing now and it's still relatively a short career compared to like the likes of Ashley, for example.
Mhm.
How do you find that as well? Are you quite centered with it? Are you quite sort of accepting of it, or do you get direction from Paul or?
Yeah, so with Paul, obviously pretty much we kind of just make decisions together. And obviously
Yeah.
he's a big, important component on, you know, what we should do moving forward. And I appreciate him for that, because he was the first person that I contacted when I wanted to start back competing. And so I think now that we have kind of our plan of like what we did last year and stuff, I think he kind of knows me, and we kind of know what works for me as far as like what we have to do as far as food or calories, you know, cardio and stuff like that. I'm glad that I have him, because he knows me and he knows how my body will more than likely respond. For me personally, I do have to push my body a bit harder, but I'm okay with that. I think, again, it's mainly more of a mental thing than it is at least physical. I mean, yeah, you get tired and drained and everything else, but if your mind is in check, it's only just a feeling. So I think that kind of helps me too, is I just don't give myself time to think about it. But yeah, no, I
Keep
think
moving.
just having Paul and just obviously the understanding of what we have to do, I just, again, I just execute, and I don't give myself time to think about it. And again, this year, I think we're having to push just a little bit harder this time around than last year. But last year I had taken 3 years off, and my body was probably in a better spot. So
Yes.
it was dropping weight, you know, as it should. And this year we're having to, like, you know, pull a little bit, but it's okay, you know, because we're finally getting to where we should have been earlier in the year. So that's all I can be grateful for. So I'm just happy that, you know, things are moving as it should.
Perhaps
Awesome.
closer to each other are always the hardest. If only we
Yes.
could always take 3 years off and or have the body
Yeah,
And just
exactly.
to
not
joy.
outgrow bikini in the
Yes,
time frame
right.
as well.
Exactly.
But we love Paul on the podcast. He's actually been
Yes.
on twice now, isn't it, Jade? He's
Twice,
been on
yeah.
Oh,
with
that's
you, so
Twice.
we love him. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
suppose I can only imagine he's great to work with. Like he knows bikini inside out, has incredible athletes. But I suppose like getting specific to your journey, like how has your relationship been with him, and how has that impacted like your success and your mindset kind of going into shows as well, and also managing feedback, because he has mentioned on episodes with us how, you know, he does have quite a close relationship with the judges and stuff like that. So I can only imagine it comes up time and time again after shows, you know, reviewing your feedback and stuff. So how you found all that?
So Paul has honestly, he's been great. I think he does a great job at being such a big advocate for his athletes, and still having great relationships with the judges in order to make sure that his athletes are moving forward where they should. And I think that's super important as a coach, because, you know, not every coach may have those relationships with the judges or other people in the industry, but I think it's important, especially if you want your athletes to elevate throughout the league too. So I'm very grateful that he has helped me with that since I've started with him. I mean, not only is he just a very professional and very just good person in general just to work with, he genuinely wants to see his athletes do well, and he'll do pretty much whatever he can to help them get there. And to me, that's very important. And I think working with especially females in bikini, I think it's important. You know, I think sometimes we need just a little bit more as far as, you know, somebody there for you and really supporting you.
Yeah.
And thankfully he's done that. I mean, not everybody, I'm sure, has a significant other or is married, and they may not have that support. So I'm grateful that he's done this, and he's been present at pretty much any show that he can be at without, you know, obviously leaving his family constantly too, but he's always present as much as, you know, we would like. And I think one thing he does after the shows is he makes sure that obviously we get our feedback. And I think that's really important, because not every coach may push you to do it. But he does, you know, and he'll be like, okay, let's go talk to so-and-so. They're over here, they're back here. Let's make sure we know. He's like, for the most part, he'll know maybe what our feedback will be prior to, which we kind of would guess, you know, more than likely conditioning, whatever it is, for the athlete. But I think that's really important to constantly make that connection with the judges, to let them know, you know, like, I need to know what you have to say about what I need to do to be better. And I think just him making that evident that that needs to be present, I think that just shows that he truly cares and he wants to make sure that his athletes take it seriously too moving forward, because it's important, especially if you want to do well. And it shows that you are going to do whatever it takes, to be better. And I think that's all he asks for, So I've been very grateful to work with him, and he's just been awesome from the beginning. So
Love that.
That feedback's everything. We talk about it, don't we, Grace? It's a very odd thing for sort of UK athletes to do. Like it doesn't present itself as an option as much as it does in the US. From what we understand from Paul and other coaches that we've spoken to, they take it very seriously, like, as you've said, in terms of communicating with the judges, getting the feedback, understanding what each individual judge leans to, even within the criteria. Each one will have a preference within that space anyway. So it's nice to hear that he obviously endorses it with you so much. In terms of feedback, I think you've mentioned quite frequently in terms of conditioning, it tends to be your feedback. Has there ever been any other feedback in terms of like specifics that they've given to you, Ari, or is it just a case of, because I know you've said that you know that you don't need to grow any more muscle at all. So is it very much sort of refinement of the look in terms of what condition you bring each time? Is that what
so
changes?
pretty much overall would just be conditioning. And
Yeah.
there have been certain things where it's like, your front pose could be a little bit more like crispier, maybe in like your abdomen section and stuff, which again, you could kind of relate that to conditioning too.
Yeah.
So those have been like the little like small things where like, a little bit sharper in your tie-ins and stuff, but again, a little bit more conditioned there. So those have really just been the things that I've had to work on. From last season, and even obviously this season too. I think that I never got feedback that my front pose needed to be worked on other than just making it a little bit more crispy, but I've worked on it and it just looks way better than it did last year. So that's really just been my consistent feedback, even from the Olympian stuff like that too. And after my last win last year, was just a little bit more conditioned in my tie-in areas. So those have just really been the things that I'm trying to just focus on leading into this year, because I'm like, I don't want to keep hearing it. Like, I just want to get there and just make sure
get
that
it
I'll
right.
never
Really
be
hard to
in
get
the
right
place
though,
ever
isn't
again.
it?
So
Yeah. I do find that like feedback can be hard sometimes because you can push for more conditioning, but it also can sometimes come at a bit of a cost in the sense that you might be running a little bit flat, or somewhere else might get too lean, your arms might, just become a little bit more capped or whatever it is. Have you ever found yourself in a position like coming into show where you're like, this is not it? Maybe you did push for conditioning, but you struggled with something else.
So I will say the one thing that I feel like kind of threw me off was last year, my stage weight was just kind of everywhere. So it was kind of actually hard to gauge where I should be and if I looked exactly where I should be. So when I got my first win, I was, I think, like 125 or something. But my second win, I was like 128. So the beginning of that day, I'm like, oh no, like I feel like I look too soft. Like I feel like I'm just not, I don't look like I did before. And so that kind of got in my head a little bit, but I was like, you know what? Like this is right after the Olympia. So I'm like, okay, maybe I still look like I should. Maybe I'm just filled out. I don't know, So that really messed with my head. But at the end of the day, I still was able to come out with a win, which I was not, I didn't know what to expect that day because they were throwing us all around. So yeah, that kind of threw me off. But again, it just kind of shows too that it's not always about your weight too, So it's a good tool to use. And I think it kind of helps with getting ready for the stage. But again, like my weight was just kind of everywhere last year. It was kind of a big range, and I still was able to win twice from two different completely, weights.
Different.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So it's definitely, again, like I like it when people make it very prominent that it's not always about your weight. It is about the look. So as long as your look is there, then you're good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easy, I suppose, especially in your early days of competing, to really get in your head. And like season to season, like Jade, I'm sure you're the same, comparing
I'm
all
nodding.
the
I'm
time.
nodding because I'm
Yeah.
I'm so bad at it.
Yeah, it's really, really hard, and people get so in their head about it. But like, maybe for bodybuilding, it's a little bit kind of different. But I just think for bikini, there's so many things at play, and because the great criteria like is so subjective, like you know, you might be a certain way, and they might not like that look one day. Do you know the kind of way? Like, it really, really does vary, and it's hard at the same time. But I suppose like with that being one struggle, has there been anything else on your journey that you've found particularly hard, maybe being with your body change? I know you mentioned like after your surgery, but anything that like I suppose made you feel like maybe competing was like too difficult to pursue or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think honestly, so after the Olympia and after my last show, after the Olympia, and having maybe like 7 weeks off from training and kind of just doing anything, and then kind of going back into it this year, I think it was kind of just like I wasn't expecting to, I guess, get so or have to move so aggressively in the beginning
Mhm.
as far as cardio and calories and things like that too. And just obviously my body just not being in a good spot to be ready. I think that sometimes kind of messes with your head a little bit because it's like, oh goodness, like I'm already, not eating that much and I'm already pushing my body so much. And then it's just like, but why is my body not responding, or why am I not where I should be? I think that's kind of just been the biggest struggle so far that I've had to mentally deal with. But again, I think those times, those are signs that, okay, maybe we just have to give ourselves just more time and not rush
Mhm.
the process. I mean, one thing about bodybuilding is you have to have patience because otherwise you like won't make it through. So I think that this is also a good like learning lesson for anybody
Mhm.
that does compete, like just practicing that patience and just knowing that you're going to have hard days, probably hard months, and then just be accepting of it. So right now I'm on like pretty low calories, but again, it's okay. Like I just don't give myself time to think about it, but I think that's really just like the hardest part. I
Mhm.
think sometimes we hear, oh yeah, some girls, they're eating like 500 grams of carbs going into a show or something like that. And it's like, well, I've never been that girl. So I don't like, I've never experienced that.
Mhm.
So it's like, always, I think sometimes it's nice to hear that, not everybody's journey is like that. And a lot of us maybe do have to suffer a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Mhm.
And again, you just have to embrace it. And I know that if we can deal with something like this and we can go through these hard days, then we can do pretty much anything. Like this
Mhm.
is very hard and doesn't come easy for a lot of people. Like to be able to diet long term or train long term, a lot of people struggle with that. So just to be able to do this and have that self control and that discipline, I think that is very rewarding. So
Mhm. Yep.
We even
I
spoke
couldn't
about
agree.
this recently on the last podcast, how beneficial
Mhm.
that discipline really, really is, and
Mm.
how much it strengthens you. Yeah, that resilience, you can apply it to everyday life, really, then can you? And I don't think any journey is really made if you're not struggling at some point. I think you appreciate it so much more, because of the hardships, really,
yeah.
deep as that
I
is.
I think they need to be there sometimes. I think those struggles sometimes in this environment where you are kind of expected to just continually excel and continually to keep moving, overcome obstacles, overcome challenges, it can be demonized almost to have a minute. And it's almost reassuring from an amateur standpoint, Ari, to listen to you talk about still being that human being, even in a professional standpoint. You've been to the Olympia, you compete as a professional athlete, but you're not immune so much as we're not immune to those lessons, those life changes, those struggles. I think as long as we accept that as a whole, and anybody who's listening accepts that as a whole, like you will keep growing in this sport. It's when you forget to take those lessons on board that you find yourself navigating away potentially.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, gotta be done.
Yeah.
Little nugget.
Yeah, exactly. And it
Yeah.
helps strengthen your mind. Like,
Hmm.
and you're going to experience this even in just like life. So I feel like this allows you to just be able to handle life challenges even better too, you know, like it's like I've noticed that the more that you get into prep sometimes, it's like the more disciplined you are with everything else in your life. So it's
Yep.
like, it's there as an amateur and as a pro, like you were going to experience probably the same emotions, like all the time, but it's worth it,
Especially getting on that Olympia stage. My
Yes,
gosh.
yes,
Like
My gosh.
you always say that
yes,
it makes the winning all the more sweeter and getting up there.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
really not about the stage.
Mm.
It's like, okay, what I actually did to get there, and it
Yeah.
probably wouldn't mean as much if it was just super, super easy. That's the
Exactly.
way.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like when you work hard for something, it just means so much more once you're able to finally just like hit that goal,
Yeah.
with
Mhm.
anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important, to have these things in life because that's what keeps us going.
Yeah.
I think that was similar, like
100%.
with your Jade, your prep, and returning to stage
Yes.
is a huge thing as well, and
Yeah.
after
Such a
so
huge
long,
pressure.
it will be
Mm.
nearly when you compete next year, what same time frame, 3 years, or
About
roughly away.
2.5 years, yeah, yeah. So I've just recently pulled a prep, Ari, for like similar reasons. So where you took yourself to Pittsburgh, I sort of caught myself in exactly the same thing, body not moving, nothing happening. So it is nice to hear, like I said, to resonate with a professional athlete in a completely different setting with external pressures from all types of angles. I think it's important for amateurs to hear that, in particular, that choice and that lesson and that understanding, because it can derail people's enjoyment for the sport. It can cause health implications and so many other external factors that will pull you away from competing permanently. And we endorse longevity on this podcast so much. So it's refreshing and it's important. And I hope everybody listens to just the experience and this sort of observations that you've made, because the more you're in tune with your body, I think the better experience you're going to have. And that much is evident in your journey, because you really can tell that you've absorbed every last second of it.
Yeah. And I'm happy to hear that you're obviously taking time too, because it is important, like for
Yeah.
your body and just mentally, sometimes you just need a break from just doing it, and
Mhm.
that's okay, and you should never feel bad about it and just appreciate it, because then all of a sudden it's going to hit you where you may want to compete again one day and you're just going to go in full throttle and be so excited, and so I'm
Mhm.
glad, because it is important, it's
Mhm.
hard to be able to do year after year after year for
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
long, amateur
Mhm.
or pro, and that's why a lot of the girls and even men, they only compete at the Olympia one year or one time a year. So it's like it's hard, to be able to do
Mhm.
it year after year. So it's nice to be able to hear that people and you are taking time off because it's
Mhm.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk
It's
to us
both.
about, well, I'm
Saying it's
sorry, I jumped in.
I was just saying it's given me the bug to compete again because I've recently retired.
Really
I'm like, oh,
badly.
maybe I should go back
It
next
might hit
year.
you one day again. You never know.
No, you literally never know. I think
Yeah.
things come naturally to you, don't you, in your journey, like whatever feels right
Yeah.
at the time. But
After that chat, I want to jump back in
yeah,
tomorrow. My
yeah,
coach will hate me. He'll hate me. He'll be like, "No, Jade."
yeah.
So in terms of onward shows, Ari, so obviously you've got Tampa coming up, right? Do you
Yes.
have anything else that you are sharing in terms of shows that you're looking at doing pre-Olympia? What's the plan from sort of here on out?
So Paula doesn't want to put pressure on me as far as like certain shows that we have to do, but
Yeah.
I always get excited for shows to do. And so hopefully after the original plan was Nashville Fit Show,
Okay.
but because we're kind of ready a little bit early, we're like, let's do Tampa as well.
Hmm.
So after Tampa, the hope is possibly to do Nashville, as long as with feedback and everything, it's doable.
Hmm.
And then after that, we may do one of the class shows, or we may do something different. I don't know. So we'll just kind of go from there, leading into the Olympia. I did those shows last year, so I may do them again, or we may do new shows,
Yeah.
but we are trying to get in front of obviously as many judges as we can going into the Olympia.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what we'll do.
Okay.
Nice.
And how do you feel kind of like competing like show to show? Does it generally like come quite easy to you, or do you struggle at all if they're like really, really close shows together?
I actually kind of prefer it as long as, it's attainable within like a
Mhm.
week or 2 weeks or whatever. But I prefer it because it kind of sometimes after a show and you get your feedback and it's like, okay, I just need to be tighter this time around or whatever. And then you get excited and you're just like,
Yeah.
okay, is it here yet? Can we
Yeah.
leave
Yeah.
yet? I'm already packed, already have my stuff ready to go. So I actually prefer the like week after or 2 weeks because
Mm.
I don't know, it kind of gets you in that like excited mindset and just to keep going. And that's how last year was. It was like show after show. And I thought at first it was going to be overwhelming, but it actually was nice and it was
Yeah.
exciting. And I want to do that again this year. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Amazing.
You
Amazing.
just build momentum, don't you? And I suppose, like you say, the more you get in front of those judges, especially going into the Olympiad, the more feedback you can get, the better tailored you are going to be to fit what they want on that day. Is the win? This is such a daft question, but is the Olympia win an overriding goal? Is that the next goal for you?
Yes. And obviously, I'm sure for most girls that do qualify, that is the goal, and
Mhm.
obviously that's a big goal,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm okay with, just making sure that I show up the best that I can be. It's hard because it's like, that's one girl out of
God
so
knows how
many.
many. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be able to do that, that's such a big goal, but it's not, it's going to happen to somebody,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
people outgrow the sport or people move on and have different chapters in their life, so it's always going to be there. So yeah, like I would say that it's definitely a goal. If it never happens, it's okay, but if it
Mhm.
happens, like that's crazy,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah, so
Mm.
yeah, I'm just going to just take it one show at a time and one
Mhm.
Olympia at a time and just always hope that I show up fitting that criteria and whatever happens, happens. And I am grateful either way just to be there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Oh, we're so excited
No,
for you though,
I
especially
know.
after last year.
thank you.
Absolutely buzzing. Where can everybody find you? We won't ramble on too long, but are you on YouTube or anything? Do you
So I
document
do
your
have a YouTube, but I haven't uploaded recently. So I
Okay.
have like a few on there, but I am on YouTube. I think it's like Ariana Brothers is my
Get you
username
on
on there.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then my Instagram is Ari_IFBB Pro. So
Amazing.
Insane.
Are you a coach or anything? I don't think I know you said that you studied science, so do you work kind of outside the industry then? Or are
So
you
I worked as a nutritionist for
Mhm.
about 3 years at our local health department, but I left it was like 2020. So I left then. But since then, I was doing some coaching with my husband, and I was going to start coaching this year with Team Pro Physique, but we kind of just put a pause on it for now, just to kind of refocus and shift everything after
Mhm.
Pittsburgh. So
Yeah.
this is the main goal, is just trying to compete and just be better this year, and possibly next year, maybe at the end of this year, we might do some coaching. So we'll
you
see.
and Paul would make a great
Yay.
team, I'd imagine as well.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, massively. Massively.
Incredible.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time, Ari. Honestly, it's been really, really refreshing. Every single person's story is very different, but yours in particular, the mindset and the the fortitude you have in this sport is incredible. So huge good luck for Tampa.
Yeah.
Thank
Huge good luck.
you. Thank you so
Before
much.
before you go, have you got any advice for our listeners at all? If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be to not give up and to always have belief in yourself. And if it's
Mhm.
something that you struggle with, start practicing it, because it will make a tremendous difference when you start believing in yourself and knowing that you can accomplish certain things. It helps keep you going. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
insane.
Massive to do
Thank
with the people
you.
around you as well, like you said,
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
family and obviously Paul as well. But yeah, great
Yeah.
advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me.